Hello, welcome to Backyard Farmer. We are so glad to have you joining us today. I'm your host, Kim Todd. We're back to answer all of those gardening questions. We can't take your phone calls, of course, but you can still submit those pictures and send us an email to byf@unl.edu. We do need to know where you live. Please tell us as much as you can about your garden issue. Remember, we also cannot possibly get to everybody's questions on the air. You can still search for those answers by visiting the social media channels, YouTube, Facebook, all that good stuff. So let's start with samples. Jody, you have a bee pyramid.
I do. So we've been getting a lot of complaints, mainly people thinking that bees are being poisoned by pesticide because they're finding a lot of dead bees in the yard. And what they are actually carpenter bees. If they're found in piles or spread out in rows by a patio or under your deck or under the fascia or porch or anything like that, they could be carpenter bees. And then after I tell people that, they want to know how to kill them. So it's a little bit different, after you identify. But the reason why we have this love-hate relationship with carpenter bees is because they are pollinators, because they're a bee, but also they nest in our structural wood. So it's going to be like our deck and our tree houses and our fence posts. So what has happened and why these bees are dead is because many of them have overwintered in those tunnels, and then when the spring comes, they're kind of cleaning up the place, and so they are going to kick out all the dead ones. And if you want to know the difference between a bumblebee and a carpenter bee, you can see here, I've turned this one around so you can see its posterior. It's got a shiny, hairless butt. So the abdomen is going to not have any hairs. Bumblebees are going to have different hairs, black, yellow, brown even. Carpenter bees won't. And if you look really closely on this pyramid I have here, these are the males. And often you'll find these hovering in front of your face because they're territorial. However, they do not sting. They are just guarding the nest area. So they're the ones with the light color on their faces. So that's what they are. If you are out and you find piles of bees that are dead, just take a look at their abdomen, maybe they're carpenter bees, and then take a look at your structure and see if you've got some damage.
Right, yeah, and that's probably the most important thing.
Right, so it's an indicator.
Yeah. Okay, Bill, we have a bottle of something.
Bottles of something, products that we may be trying to grab now as we're thinking about trying to kill weeds, and those dandelions are blooming, or even Lincoln, they're kind of post-bloom already, and we're seeing those puffballs everywhere. And this is actually, when you get to that puffball stage, a good time to kill those weeds because they've just put a lot of energy into making seed, and now they're weak. And so this is why we spray them right after they make seed, or perennials we spray in the fall when they're getting ready to go to store sugars for winter. And so the first thing I wanted to show is just another a public service announcement here about, the Roundup label. There's Roundup, which kills everything, and then this is Roundup for lawns. And so this actually doesn't contain glyphosate or Roundup that you might think of in a farming setting. It has actually a lot of the active ingredients that we talk about in this show that are kind of that specialty ingredient, like things like quinclorac and sulfentrazone, things that kill crabgrass and nutsedge. And so this actually does kill a lot of weeds with pretty good active ingredients. And so in terms of killing those tough weeds, this actually does a pretty nice job. Just make sure you grab the Roundup for lawns, not the Roundup, or especially the Roundup Extended Control, which has got a pre-emergent in it. So if you kill it and then nothing could grow back for a while. Mm-hmm. And so just make sure you read your labels closely. Some of these bottles will work for something like this, which is a proportioner. It might have a setting on the top that you can set the output just to kind of help with the applications. But remember, labels are the law, but if we use things appropriately, this can be a good time of year to kind of clean up things. Not as great as the fall, but if we forgot, this is the time to do it once that seed head phase is over with, and then build up density during the summer to keep those weeds out.
All right, so a double whammy if you really have a bad lawn situation.
Yeah, exactly. Clean it up, but then that's not the problem. The big problem is get that lawn dense, and then we can keep those weeds out.
Excellent, thanks, Bill. Not the kind of roses that most of us want in our vases, Kyle.
They could be pretty. But yeah, I have some Twilight Zone roses here, is the cultivar, that unfortunately are infected with Downy Mildew. And so we always talk about sanitation, and at the end of the year, you want to make sure that you are removing as much of that old material as you can. This is one of those diseases that really flourishes when we don't sanitize the way that we should. And so Downy Mildew on roses can affect really all parts of the rose. And so we can get infections on the stem, and so we have the lesions there, on the buds and the sepals as well. And then on the leaves, we can also get some spots that show up. Now, the spots can be quite variable depending on the variety of rose that you're dealing with. Different cultivars of rose have very different responses to Downy Mildew. Sometimes they'll be kind of purplish lesions, otherwise black or maybe a little bit red. But one thing that tends to be quite common with Downy Mildew is if you look on the bottom side of the leaves in the morning or during times of high humidity, we'll see some of that fungal growth or some fuzziness underneath those lesions, and that is fairly diagnostic for Downy Mildew. Now, with control, again, if you didn't clean up the garden as well as you should have last year, the things that you can do now is trying to water later in the day when maybe there's not as much active fungus on the underside of those leaves. And as a last resort, there are some fungicide applications that can be used. However, sanitation. And so really make sure that you are cleaning up your bed at the end of the year. And when you start to see some of these lesions show up early in the season, pluck those leaves off and get rid of them as soon as you can.
So pretty different from powdery mildew.
Yes, very different than powdery mildew. Powdery mildew will have just the white growth up on the top as opposed to the bottom of the leaf.
All right, thank you, Kyle. All right, Jody, first picture questions are yours. This is a person on campus, actually, last week who found this huge ant colony and wonders, are these harmful? Should anything be done about it? And obviously, on campus, we rely on somebody else to do that, but what if this was in a homeowner situation?
Yeah, usually if it's in a homeowner situation, people are complaining because it's in the turf and it's bothering their mowing. And they could do a bait or they can do a granular on that. On campus, they're probably beneficial. If they're in your way, they would be in your way, then you can call the pest control out on campus.
Or just stomp on them?
Yeah, if you make it like unfavorable for them, then they won't like it. But yeah, I would say that's just a really big field ant colony that's hanging out.
All right. Your next one is a papillion viewer who says this is the southeast side of their home in the backyard, kind of on a wood rack, and wonders, should they be worried about these?
I wouldn't be too worried since they're outside. It looks like these are odorous house ants, and that looks like a nest because it's got eggs and larvae and pupa in there, which is kind of cool. We don't really get to see ant nests very often, but it looks like there's probably something on top of that. It's better than them nesting in your home, so that's a positive. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. If they do start trailing inside, then you would want to do a sugar bait and just keep feeding them. They are sugar hungry and they love like the honeydew producing insects outside. So.
All right, and your next one is Lincoln viewer bought this A-frame bee house and is really wondering whether she should return it because it is bamboo as opposed to rotting logs and piles of sticks and twigs.
Yeah, well, if you could get your money back, I would return it. It's all really good intentions to increase pollinator habitat. However, with the ones that we can buy at stores, they're typically not able to be cleaned at the end of the year, so they're glued to the back of the frame, and I don't know how deep the frame is, so that could be a problem because the depth really matters when it comes to the solitary bees having enough like female to male ratio. So if you do want to have pollinators in your yard, you can do, drill holes, various size holes in logs, or use stems or, pithy stems. So that would be a cheaper option, and it would probably be like maybe even better and healthier for the bees in your yard.
Well, and it was, we really couldn't tell how deep it
Yeah.
was. It's not the bamboo that's the issue, though, necessarily.
Yeah, because some of the bamboo is really like got a wider diameter, so the bigger the diameter, the deeper you want it, because it will be different bees there. So great intentions, but if you can get your money back, then make your own.
Jody, with the baits, where do you put them? Like inside your house, outside your house, in a like wet area? Like where are you supposed to put those?
In the backyard farm garden on a pole.
No, for the ants.
Oh, for the ants.
the ants?
For ant
You're
baits.
way back on the ants.
They have put them as close to the nest as possible, so then they don't have to go far, right? If you feed them right on your countertop, they're going to come to your countertop to eat. So you feed them outside, but like they have stakes that you can put outside.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Bill. Turf questions for you.
All right. No ant questions.
Well, maybe there's ants in your turf.
Okay.
The first is a Lincoln viewer moved in, and the south-facing front yard is dead and thin, especially in the center. There are a couple pictures on this. It's mostly under a large oak, still gets lots of sun and water, looks unhealthy. Acorns are abundant. They've tried to remove them. They want to know how to revive this area and keep it healthier.
Yeah, I think if it's south-facing and you really think you're getting enough sun, then we might think about water. If that oak is taking a lot of water from that lawn, those roots are generally pretty high up, and so that's where the grass roots are, and so that can be problematic. And so you're watering the tree and the lawn, remember that, when you have those dry periods. And so that could be part of it if you're really sure that it's not a sun limitation, which it generally is when you have such large trees like this. So watch your water, do the little tests with a screwdriver or a weed plucker, make sure that you can stick it in there in the summertime, but it's not hard as a rock, but it's also not sopping wet. That's really kind of your ideal. If it's thin now, when the grass starts to grow, and honestly, we've been so cold, and it's looking like next week's might be a little bit cold too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the grass is just hanging out. It's just waiting for some heat. And so we're seeing a lot of this right now, and patience really is key. Once we get some sustained heat, if you're not seeing that, you could overseed, use a starter fertilizer. I like the starter fertilizers that contain a pre-emergence herbicide like mesotrione in them, and try to get some density that way. If you do seed, make sure you try to use some kind of incorporation technology like a dethatcher even, just to help push that seed in, and you'll get much better results into an existing lawn.
All right, and your next one is an Oakland, Nebraska viewer. They had to cut down a bunch of Austrian pines, and they were in this area, and now they want to know what your recommendations might be for seeding turf in that soil that's had pine needles on it for 20 years plus.
Yeah, there's a lot of this kind of almost misconception that the pine needles are going to really acidify our soils. That may or may not happen. You can do it with a soil test. Generally, we have pretty buffered soils. It means it's hard for the soil to change pH much. So most likely the soils are probably fine. I would just get those pine needles out of there so you can have a good seeding medium. If you wanted to, you can incorporate some compost into it. And then the same thing, get that seed down, come through with a lawn seeder or a power rake or even an aerator, make some holes, incorporate it, and then get that starter fertilizer on. And remember, when you're seeding in the spring, you really want to have that pre-emergent material in there to compete with the crabgrass and the foxtail that are going to start to come up this time of year also.
All right, thanks, Bill. All right, Kyle, the first one here is just outside, it's in Lincoln, and it's Vanderwolf pines with brown needles. She says they had a row of Vanderwolfs planted, and there are white pines behind them. Last year they had to replace one. Now they're noticing these brown clusters of needles. And this is more on the new one, which is maybe looking a little unthrifty there. Is this disease-based or environmental?
It's most likely environmental. It's been a rough couple of months for a lot of our trees. Depending on when these were planted, if they were in the area when we had that severe cold spell, and then a couple of days later it was up in the 70s in Lincoln. That's not conducive to good tree growth. And so I really think that's the primary issue that we're seeing here. I wasn't seeing any indication of Dothostroma or any of the needle blights that we can see on pines. So I would just keep an eye on these young ones and make sure that they are getting the proper care.
All right. And your next one is in Elkhorn. This is an aspen. And I think we have 2 pictures of this one. And can this be treated?
Yes. So no, it cannot be treated. But it's actually I think this is a beautiful picture. But again, I'm a gross pathologist. This is Cytospora Canker. And so we always talk about Cytospora Canker primarily on spruces, causing a white, kind of a white pitch to be produced. On aspens and poplars, it's more orange. So when we are dealing with cankers, fungicides or any sort of chemical control really is not too easy. And Cytospora Canker is one of those cankers that tends to be favored by environmental stresses, especially winter injury, which we had a lot of this year, and drier conditions. So depending on how much water these trees have been getting, that could cause the canker to become a little bit more prolific. However, again, just make sure that you are doing that you are giving that tree adequate moisture throughout the season, and hopefully it will survive.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Well, with so many new gardeners out there, we thought it would be really important to focus on a key element to gardening, and that is water. How much is too much? When and how you should water? Questions like these are really critical to your garden growing the right way. Here to help us answer those questions is Scott Evans.
We talk a lot about plant success here at Backyard Farmer. We talk about right plant, right place, soil amendments, and proper watering. Watering is really important this season because 2/3 of the state is currently in the drought. And one of the most frequent questions we get is how much water should I be giving my plants? And the simplest answer is we want to water until it reaches the bottom of the roots. This is going to be different from plants that are in the container and then plants that are in the ground. When we're working with containers, we need to be mindful of a couple different things. When it comes to container, we want to look at the actual pot. We know that terracotta pots are going to dry out quicker than a glazed or a plastic pot. And this is going to help dictate how you're going to be watering these plants. When we water a container plant, we want to be watering the soil and not necessarily the plant itself. And we want to water until it comes out of the bottom of the pot. This is going to make sure that we're getting all the roots in the container a good drink of water. And when it comes to the heat of the summer, don't be afraid or worried that if your plants start to wilt. During the hottest part of the summer, it's very common for that to happen, but we want to check the soil moisture before we start to add any extra water. So stick your finger in the soil and gauge to see if you need to water, because it's easier to add water to a container than to take it out. Raised bed gardening continues to grow in popularity because it makes it easier for us to be out in the garden. But when it comes time to watering, we need to be mindful that a raised bed is an elevated structure, that it's not in the ground. And this can affect how quickly the soil dries out. So we want to be checking the soil moisture before we add anything, very similar to what we do for a container garden. We want to stick our finger into maybe that second or third knuckle to measure that soil moisture. We had a couple times this spring actually, that we had some really warm days and it was windy, and a lot of our raised beds dried out quickly. So make sure that you're out there checking that soil moisture to give our plants a good drink if they need any. When we're watering plants in the ground, we want to measure the soil moisture before we start to water. And one of the ways that we can do that is using a long screwdriver. Most of us have one of these in the garage and we don't know what to use it for, but now you have a reason to use it. We want to stick this in the ground for about 6 inches for our herbs and veggies, and then 12 inches for our perennials, and up to 18 inches for our trees and shrubs. And we're going to use it like we do a toothpick on a cake to see if it's done. Stick it in the soil, the proper depth, pull it out. If it's moist, if it has mud on it, we know that there's plenty of moisture down there. But if it's dry or if it's hard to get into the ground, we know that it's time to water our plants. When it comes time to water our gardens, we need to think a little bit different than we normally would with watering. When we're watering, we want to make sure that we're putting the water where it's needed, so it's going to be in the soil and not on the plant. And this is important for a lot of our vegetable gardens because prolonged leaf wetness can actually cause some fungal issues, and we don't want that to happen. So when we're watering our garden, we can utilize tools like these soaker hoses that you see here to get the water where it's needed. That helps reduce evaporation to the atmosphere, and it's a great way to conserve moisture. So this summer, during the heat of the day, make sure that you're out there checking your plants, getting the water where it needs to be so you have happy and healthy plants.
So keep that sharp eye on those garden plants. Do not forget to take Mother Nature into account as she hopefully brings us some very timely rain. All right, next questions. Jody, this is a Cedar Creek viewer, 2 cottonless cottonwoods, about 6 years old. These limbs fell off last fall. He thinks they're borers, and can they be treated?
It depends what the rest of the tree looks like. These are likely cottonwood borers. So I would, maybe, and if they fell off. So I would get the rest of the tree looked at, probably a certified arborist. I know that they really like the younger trees, and the larvae take 2 years to develop. The adults will lay eggs though, and they're actually quite beautiful beetles. But the adults will lay eggs at the base of the tree in the summer. So if you're gonna spend the money to treat, there are like permethrin sprays that you can spray the trunk early July and then late July. But again, get that checked out to see if it's worth treating.
All right, and your next one is a North Platte viewer that has these 1/4-inch round holes in a heritage oak.
Yes, these are not bugs. This is a sap sucker, which is a woodpeckerish bird that is, it looks bad, but I think it's minor damage from what I've read. And there's actually a really cool, I think it's like Outdoor Nebraska thing with birds, and it talks about when these sap suckers are around. The only thing that I've found if you wanted to manage this is to put burlap on the trunk during the times to deter the bird when it's there. But
I like the holes better.
yeah, or shiny objects.
Shiny
I guess shiny objects to scare them away. I'm not sure.
All right. Okay, Bill, this is an Omaha viewer. They've been in their house a year. Zoysia, multiple dead areas. The previous owners had dogs. And they want to power rake in June, core aerate, and then plant plugs. They want to know whether they need to test and replace the soil first. They've started with a fertilizer and liquid aeration program, so all sorts of things. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm assuming they went back to zoysia with the talking about plugging. So I see a lot of cool season grasses in there first. So if you really want to go back to zoysia, first thing you want to do is round up all those cool season grasses and get them out of there. Don't worry about liquid aeration. Those products don't even work, so it's not worth your time. Get your plugs in. Do just a straight granular starter fertilizer with the plugs, and wait a little bit. It's still really cold, and so I know this is the problem with zoysia, right? You get really excited, and it's spring, and that grass doesn't want to green up as quickly. It's a warm season grass, and so we'd be a little bit early to do that at this moment. But clean up those cool season grasses first. If you need to level off, otherwise you can just drill in plugs and put some starter fertilizer down when it's a little bit warmer.
All right, and your next one is a viewer who wonders, this is Roca, whether this is saltgrass in his turf. And we've got a couple pictures of this one too. He's also wondering how to treat it if whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't think it's saltgrass, just based on that picture. It could be a couple of our different weeds, maybe some perennial warm season weeds that are maybe some remnant color there. Most likely, if you have little spots of it, probably a non-selective would be your best bet, just to try to hit those areas and then let your desirable grass come back in. If you do a non-selective, like a Roundup, glyphosate, you can seed back into that within a couple days. And so you can kill off those little patches without having if you just know it's a weed and you want it gone. But I would question it's probably not saltgrass in that part of Nebraska. Maybe western Nebraska, but that's not what I think that looks like to me. So no definitive diagnosis there, but that would be the solution, I guess.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Bill. All right, Kyle, this is a Fremont viewer. We have a couple pictures of this. They found 8 or 10 of these in an area about 15 by 20, 2 to 3 inches in diameter. He says they look like circular footprints. And he thought it was maybe a walnut buried by an industrious squirrel. What are they for real?
Those are most likely earth balls. They are, again, pathologists, not the greatest at naming things, just balls of things that we find in the earth. You may know them a little bit better as puff balls. And so if they're above the ground, we tend to think of them as puff balls. But there are earth balls that form as well, and they tend to be kind of right around the soil surface. Really nothing to worry about with these. There are some of these mushrooms that can be a little bit toxic, and so if this is an area where there's a lot of kids playing or animals, then maybe you'll want to get rid of them. Otherwise, I would probably just let them be.
All right. Your next one is actually from one of our fans from the Garden State, which is a long ways from here, weeding a mulched area and overrun with chickweed. And then he found these 4 inches into the soil. They shriveled after they were on the floor of his truck.
Yep, mushrooms will often shrivel after they dry out. And you think, these aren't mushrooms, these are eggs of some sort. Well, these are stinkhorn eggs. Each year, they'll send up a nice stalk. It's often going to be bright orange or maybe red. And as the name implies, it's going to stink. And that will attract flies, other insects there, and that will help spread those spores around. But again, those are just stinkhorn eggs, very, very common. If you want to get rid of them, you did the exact right thing and just dig them up.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Kyle. Well, we are still waiting to get our plants into the garden because it has been so cold, but that does not mean we don't have plants growing. Let's take a few minutes to hear from Terry James in the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're kind of on a holding pattern once again this week. We've looked at the extended forecasts, not really going to get too terribly warm, not going to get too terribly hot though either. So eventually those plants are going to come out. There's one more cold night that's going to happen. So hopefully this next week those plants will come out of the greenhouse to begin hardening off. If your plants haven't moved outside, you might want to think about doing that. But we have a lot of stuff in our perennial beds that are looking fantastic. Our asparagus has really done really well. We've got a couple harvests out of it. Now we're kind of letting it go to kind of fern out so that it'll get ready for next year. Our zizia is looking fantastic. Those golden flowers are starting to bloom in our rain chain. And even our strawberries made it through the winter. So we have those cute little strawberry white flowers spattered around our Backyard Farmer Garden. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden this week and check it out.
Right now, it is time for the lightning round. Are you ready, Kyle?
Born ready.
All right, this is both a Lincoln viewer and an Omaha viewer sent this one, and it is gray spots in the turf after a rain. What is that?
Could be quite a few things. So I would say the kind of standard answer in this case, send a sample to your local extension office or the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic.
All right, we have a Carney viewer who has a lot of mushrooms in their lawn, has been putting baking soda on them and says it kills them. Is there a downside? Have you ever heard of that?
I have not heard of that. I can't necessarily think of any issues in the lawn, any negative issues with the baking soda. So I guess keep doing it, but that's really not going to kill the mushrooms. The mushrooms are still feeding on some woody material lower down.
All right, this is a North Platte viewer who wants to know whether boxwood blight has been confirmed yet.
Nope.
Is there anything to prevent curly top virus this year that they can do this year? They had it last year. This is a Pierce County viewer.
Go and try to select a resistant variety of tomatoes.
All right, excellent. Nice job, although you did forget that it was lightning for one of those questions.
You know, lightning can take a while sometimes.
It can. Heat lightning.
Yes.
All right, Bill, are you ready?
Yeah.
This is a Republican City viewer that has a 45-year-old fescue lawn.
Okay.
The worms have made it rough. How can he smooth it out?
Ooh, there's not a lot you can really do for the worms. People try to roll it, and that can work a little bit. Actually, one thing you can do is that power rake again. That can kind of help break up some of those little clumps and make it a little bit smoother, but generally it's not going to be hard to just smooth it out by just rolling it.
All right, this is a Loop City viewer who wants to know what will kill brome but not the broadleaf plants.
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know. I don't want to recommend anything and be wrong, so I'm going to pass on that one. You can give me 0 for that one, yeah.
They will.
All right.
This is a pruning viewer who says Roundup does not touch the wild onions in his turf. What will?
Roundup doesn't kill it? This is Roundup resistant wild onion? I don't know if that's the case. I'm not sure. I would try like that Roundup for lawns. I think has wild onion on it. There's a lot of those different active ingredients in it. It should be decent to kill, but the Roundup not killing it is a concern. So I would send a sample in if you really are having a problem with that.
Well, and we have those in the lawn on campus. Maybe we'll see if Jeff can figure out how to get them killed.
He's looking at this is a tough lightning round
you have
here.
no idea what the other
I was like, where is this going here?
You're lucky you didn't get to the next ones. All right, and they're all from viewers.
That's right. That's right.
No,
All right.
I'm not ready.
You're not ready? You want to just pass all the way around?
Okay,
This
we'll
is a hard
try.
one, yeah.
All right, this is a viewer who wants to know when to start the systemic imidacloprid treatment for Japanese beetles in roses.
Roses, it's usually around Mother's Day, but if we're having that cold spell, it will be, I don't know, maybe a week after Mother's Day?
All right. There was an ad recently for a mosquito and tick lawn treatment for $300 a year. Is that worth it?
No.
All right. This is a viewer who had white flies on plants that they brought home. This is Holdridge. And they're wondering if the white flies will proliferate in the landscape.
They might if they're outside. So oh yeah, lightning round, yes.
All right. This is an eagle viewer who is saying there's still very few bees or pollinators. Are our crops in trouble?
Nope.
All right. This is a New Jersey viewer who wonders if insects can cause asparagus to curl.
Yes, asparagus beetle will do that.
All right. Another one is how often can insecticidal soap be applied to perennials for aphids? This is Council Bluffs.
I would read the label. It would be it wouldn't hurt it, but you would want to make sure it's doing good and economically. You don't want to use it every day.
All right. Thank you, Jody. That was a weird lightning round.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Yeah.
I know.
Jeez.
All those weeds that don't want to croak.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so our plants of the week this week are this great big tall round one is one of our ornamental alliums, one of the giant alliums. The actual stem, and the stems have no foliage, were about 4 feet tall this year. It also comes in purple, and then of course there's some that are even bigger than this, but this one sort of floats above the rest of the landscape. It's pretty interesting to see, and then of course they dry. And the other one is a ground cover. This is called Variegated Solomon Seal. It's still in flower right now. A little variegated edge on it. It's rhizomatous. It forms a really nice little colony. Does not get out of control. Is a very, very good shade plant. And it doesn't appear that any creatures eat either one of these. I have seen some rust of some sort, or one of Kyle's leaf spots on a little bit of the Solomon seal. But other than that, this is kind of a fun combination for this time of spring. All right, on that note, if I can set pictures come next. So Jody, your first one is an Omaha viewer that found tiny, fast-moving mites in the garden soil. And it's a garden soil mix that she purchased. She's saying thousands of fast-moving light tan mites. She wonders if she should use 7 on them or something else. And she used neem. What should she be doing with these?
She should be appreciating these mites because they are not parasitic. They are actually, they call them free living predators. And so they actually prey on like pests. So springtails and insect eggs and spider mites. So there's like 11,000 different types of these kind of mites. So this one is actually one of the good guys. If you want like biocontrol, sometimes people can buy these mites to control pests. So this is something that naturally occurs in the soil, so maybe try to kill them less.
All right, kill them less. You're either dead or you're not.
Well, it's not working with neem. It's not gonna.
All right, your next one is they were here last year. There are only a couple horseradish plants left, and they've been in the family for 100 years. So they want to save the horseradish from this beast. What is this?
Yeah, so these are horseradish flea beetles, and like they're black beetles with these kind of light stripes on both wing covers. And if they had them last year, they will come back because they do overwinter in the soil there. But knowing that this is like been in the family for a long time, they're probably not able to rotate the crops like something that they would be able to do. Mm-hmm. So if you still see them, I would use maybe spinosad, treat the plants with that, and they need to feed on it for a couple days in order for it to work. But you're going to want to try to get rid of these beetles so they don't come back. Because if we want to keep these plants, then we want to get rid of those beetles. All
right, and your next one is a Lincoln viewer who found this tiger swallowtail like this week. Looks pretty ragged, assumes it's nearing the end of its life. Curious about why now and how long they live.
Oh, I saw my first one actually in Lincoln last weekend. This one, is a little ratty. I mean, it was really windy on the weekend, so, just a butterfly. Mm-hmm. So it could have gotten, beat up a little bit. But the life cycle, so they're active here in Nebraska from April to August, and then they pupate in October. We have a couple generations here, depending on the temperature and where they're located, but they're a host plant for the caterpillars, which are amazing looking things. So little tiny caterpillars, they look like bird poop, but then they grow up to look like little snakes. These, the caterpillars with the eye spots, they kind of look like tadpoles with eye spots, very strange. But they feed on sweet bay, tulip tree, and red cherry. So you need the host plant for the caterpillars, but then these beautiful eastern tiger swallowtails will feed and nectar on a lot of different plants. So we should be seeing them from now until the end of summer.
Excellent, thanks, Jody.
Beautiful picture.
It was. All right, Bill, this is a 53-year-old lawn. It's Old Lawn Day, I guess, in Omaha. Despite their best efforts, the violets have pretty much taken over. They want to know whether they can treat to remove the violets or have the entire lawn cut out and resodded.
Yeah, we can definitely treat for the violets. We can get some control, but if we're not correcting the underlying issue, they're just going to keep coming back. It's the ecology. Which plant is best positioned to win in that environment? And violets are more competitive than the grass. It's as simple as that. So we are constantly going to be struggling with this. So we can try some selective control options, and there's numerous ones out there. You can go to a garden center and you'll probably find lots of herbicides that you would use selectively. You could try non-selective. I think they talked about maybe doing non-selective control. Mm-hmm. And if you did that now, you're probably just going to kill the lawn out, and the violets are going to grow back because now there's no lawn to even compete with. So if you want to go non-selective, I would wait a little bit, and then you could go non-selective maybe in late July, and then try to kill things off, and then reseed early enough. before they start to really get going again. And I would use tall fescue. If you can't grow tall fescue there, and I'd start from sod because you'd rather have a plant that's mature and full of sugar and put it into the shade. If you can't grow that grass there, you're not going to be able to grow any kind of grass there. No fine fescues or anything else. So that's when you have to kind of have that thought of what am I really trying to accomplish here? Either you start thinning out the canopy of the trees, or you just kind of live with the violets.
All right, and your next one is they have battled their lawn for 4 years, nearly all dandelions. So they also tried a natural weed-killing remedy that had iodine in it to spot treat. They have children, so they haven't wanted to use something pretty toxic.
Sure,
so.
and I have some really great pictures from research plots in which we didn't try to kill dandelions with synthetic pesticides, and we just used fertilizer. And by just fertilizing properly, we had perfect strips of no dandelions and strips of dandelions, just by how we fertilized. It really comes down again to the ecology. Dandelion is a very weak weed, as long as the grass is strong. And so whatever we can do, so watching our water, if the soil's compacted, you might have someone kind of aerate it, but generally it's going to needs a little bit more fertilizer, maybe 2 applications a year. I like to do it in late May and then again in late August. Those are my 2 prime fertilizer times, and if I can drive my density up there, you shouldn't have a problem getting rid of the dandelions. And honestly, they're going to go hide in the grass now soon anyways, and you're going to forget about them. And then you'll see them next year with the yellow, and then you'll be like, oh, I want to get them. So if you do want to spray them out, you could do it now, or you do it in the fall. But right now, let's think about fertilizing to keep that density up.
All right, thanks, Bill. All right, Kyle, this is I think 3 pictures here. They appeared overnight along the bank of a lake in central Nebraska. What are they, and are they poisonous?
Potentially, but most likely not. These are some sort of Inky Cap mushrooms, and so they are in the Coprinus genus, and the undersides of them are black, and as the name implies, inky. You can wipe it off on your fingers and things like that. That black ink actually will attract more insects to help spread them around. But I wouldn't not worry about them, but I wouldn't eat them either.
All right. And your next one is actually a papillion viewer. She found this on her barrel planter. It appeared overnight. She's new to Nebraska and gardening, and she's worried about it spreading to plants or hurting.
She won the jackpot. Yeah, I would be very excited if this were at my house. This is just a slime mold that's popped up. Nothing to worry about. They are not toxic. Just they show up when there's adequate moisture. When the moisture is gone, they'll dry up and kind of poof away. But as it is, just enjoy the nice, beautiful slime you have.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Well, there is absolutely nothing wrong with a dozen roses for Mom on Mother's Day. If you want to be a little more creative than that, we have some good ideas, especially if your mom loves to garden.
We have some amazing hanging baskets. They make wonderful Mother's Day presents. They come in all sorts of amazing colors and varieties, and they come anywhere from shade to light. And if you want to even customize your own, there are plenty of plants you can buy by themselves that make great options to really personalize that hanging basket for your mother for Mother's Day. You can always do planters if you really want to go above and beyond. Buy those individual items and do the whole landscape if you want. So if your mother is into cooking, you can always buy items such as patio tomatoes or herbs that can sit out on the porch, and when your mother is ready to do some cooking, she can always bring them in and have that fresh produce to serve for supper. So in creating your own little garden, you have a wide variety of colors you can choose from, and most go together. Spring colors such as pinks and purples go wonderful together. If you want to play it safe, you can always go monochromatic and do one color. And also, when you're creating your garden, you have to keep in mind when you're looking at textures, are they variegated? What does it look like, and how will it go together once all the flowers start blooming? You have plenty of wonderful and amazing choices out there for Mother's Day, but if you're a little scared and those don't work for you, you can always go with that bouquet of roses.
So there you go. You can take a few minutes to think about that and maybe try something else this year for your mom. And that was really a great job by one of our students to be able to go on camera and do that. All right, last round of questions here, Jody. The first one is a Lincoln viewer who says something is eating the columbine plants, nothing else, just those, and they're not eating the whole columbine. What is that?
Well, they only like the leaves, and seems like they've left the flowers for you. So this is a Columbine Sawfly, and a sawfly, as an adult, is a non-stinging wasp, but as the larvae, they look like caterpillars, but I call them creepy caterpillars because they kind of look like they have an eyeball, but they all eat like a lot of them together, and they will go from the outside in, and then they'll just leave like the veins and the stems. There's not a whole lot you can do to save the leaves now, but it won't kill the plant, so that's good. Next year, you might want to, well, you can cut this down if you want to, but next year, scout early as soon as those leaves come up and pick those sawflies off of there.
How big are the?
They can be, I think, up to like a half an inch. Like when I zoomed in, I could actually see one still on the stem.
All right, excellent. Your next one is a viewer who says she has a lot of these holes around her lawn, and she wonders if they're cicada killer dens.
Okay, so they're not cicada killer dens. So cicadas aren't out, so their killers aren't out either. I can't tell if there's a tunnel in there or not. If they're just holes, they could be from birds.
Right, either birds or voles or something.
The voles, you'll see tunnels, but the voles aren't active right now. They're kind of hiding. They did a lot of damage when there was snow cover, but I know a lot of birds have been digging in the turf.
All right, and your next one is a viewer in the Plattsmouth area. Pictures of a large grub that was found in the garden mulch seem to be bigger than the grubs they find in the sod. And apparently we didn't get the picture. So it's a grub about like yay. Any idea how big that?
Does it crawl on its back? If it crawls on
They
its
rolled on their backs to crawl, yes.
Yes, so that-
and tried to bite his glove.
Oh yeah, they'll do that too. So that is the larvae of a green June beetle. So those big iridescent, really cool ones that sound like bumblebees. Those adults come out in July, but these grubs, I mean, they're like that all winter, and then they start feeding again. And yeah, they'll pinch you, and they will hurt. But they always crawl on their backs.
Wow.
Weird.
And do they do a lot of damage to Bill's turf?
No, not usually. Not compared to some of the other white
Not
grubs.
this time of year usually, yeah.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Jody. Okay, so your next set, Bill, this is an Omaha viewer. They had 4 to 6 inches of lead-tainted soil removed. Old grass was good, never needed watering, had new soil, new sod. Greened up nicely last spring, then got thin and kind of clumpy soil. They did include a soil test, and now he can see the stripes in the sod. I think we have a couple pictures on this. So he's really wondering what can be done about his new sod.
There's some good clues to this mystery here. One is we removed 4 inches of topsoil, even though there was some lead in there, and that is the safety issues to people. Generally, the grasses can tolerate a fair amount of lead. Certain levels will become toxic. And so what happened was you probably removed that soil that was old, and so it had a lot of organic matter in it, good soil structure, and then they brought in soil that probably wasn't that great. And that's generally what happens in construction. It just gets moved around and kind of lumped together. Then they have maybe a good pile and a not so good pile, and maybe there's a little bit of both in each. And so you probably just have an issue with poor soils and then get sodded over the top. So you're starting from scratch. And so this is a scenario where you probably need to be a little bit more aggressive with your fertility, especially early on, because that's going to help build organic matter in our soil and make our soil healthier. You can use organic products. You can use compost. Those are all going to help. And then watch your water, because these soils will dry out very quick. They're high clay. That means they'll be slow to drain, but that also means they hold on to their water really tightly, and so the plant can get wilty. So you're gonna have to baby this more like you're doing a new lawn in like a subdivision, even though that site is decades old.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks, Bill. Then you have a viewer, this is also Omaha in the Keystone area, but I know we've seen a lot of this in Lincoln too. She says it's sprouting up in spots throughout the lawn. She wants to know what it is and how to get rid of it.
This is the bane of golf course superintendents around the world. It's found on all 7 continents, even Antarctica. This is annual bluegrass Poania. If you're a golfer, you hear them talk about poor putting because of this particular weed. It's a kind of annual. It can survive our summers. That's why it can be problematic. It wants to die generally when we don't want it to. And in a lawn scenario, it really likes it short and shady and wet. So anything you can do to kind of dry things out, it's very shallow rooted. Mowing it higher, mowing it over 2.5 inches, it can't compete. And if you can get some more sun there, that's going to do all the ingredients to get rid of this weed. If you don't do those things, it can proliferate and you might have a whole annual bluegrass backyard.
And it does not last through the summer, does it?
There's annual and perennial biotypes, but most are annuals in this scenario, and those are the ones that will be dying out, and then you'll be like, where did my lawn go? Well, it wasn't a perennial grass system in a lawn.
All right, thanks, Bill. You get a turf question here, Kyle, so you can bounce it to Bill if you don't like it.
All right.
This is an Elkhorn viewer. They say, why is their lawn looking like this? It's bluegrass that was overseeded with tall fescue last fall after they aerated. They did fertilize on Monday and watered for the first time on Tuesday, and I think we have 3 pictures of this one that are the lawn, the blades, and maybe a third one here. Yeah,
and
the seed, certified
pack.
seed.
Yeah, this one I wasn't really able to find any signs or symptoms of a disease on there. When I was looking at the close-up pictures of the grass leaves, we're not seeing any lesions or anything like that are evident to indicate maybe one of our Helminthosporium sheath rots. So melting out could potentially be an option here, but normally we would expect to see some lesions on the turf as well. So. Could be a few things. One thing that this could be is it could be the remnants of snow mold. We did have a lot of issues with snow mold this past year, and it could be just what's growing out. And so the tips of those plants are still dead, but green is coming up afterwards. The other thing that Bill had mentioned is there is a lot of variability in and when these different varieties will green up. And so that could be one of the things that we're dealing with. When looking at the seed pack, I think there were 4 different types of fescue on there, and so that could be another potential issue. But I would just keep an eye on it. I wouldn't be thinking about any sort of treatment, and if it persists or expands, then again, another chance to get to know your local extension office or send a sample into the diagnostic clinic.
Exactly, and to us after everybody else can't figure it out, and we'll see if we can't figure it out.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think we have at least one announcement tonight of something fun going on in the gardening world, and that would be the biggest grower competition. We did that last year in our department, agronomy.unl.edu, and it's really fun. It's basically a competition around the state to get young people involved in gardening. And it's truly a competition, and it's a lot of fun. So you can go to that site and figure out what's going on that one. So the other is Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. Starts tonight at 8 o'clock, right after this show. You can watch us on Facebook, excuse me, and you can follow us on Backyard Farmer in NET, Nebraska. And we really like to hear what people have to say about that. So that's always a fun one to start. All right, we have just a minute. Jody, you have a question here that really is kind of related to the swallowtail. And that would be, people are wondering if you don't have a swallowtail or you don't have Cecropia moths or Luna moths or anybody like that, how will they come if you just plant the plants, or do you have to buy them?
No, I wouldn't buy them. I would plant as many things as you can. If you're looking for Luna moths, they don't feed, so you just need to put a light on or go out in the country and see them at wherever they're going to show up at lights.
All right, so no buying, just planting.
Yeah, right? You don't want to buy them.
All right, Bill, you have 20 seconds to answer this. This is a person in Dalton. They want to plant a buffalo grass lawn around June 1st. They want to know, should they sow a nurse crop to protect the grass seedlings?
No, not. I would just go right in with the buffalo grass. You can seed it, you can sod it, you can plug it, whatever one you want to do. But I wouldn't do a nurse crop because it's just going to help compete with those buffalo grass plugs and slow that spread down.